to hear Dr. Tawfik Hamid address critical thinking's role in the ideological battle against radical Islam. Dr. Hamid is a distinguished scholar originally from Egypt. He holds a doctorate in internal medicine from the Cairo University and a degree in literature from the University of Auckland. In Egypt, Dr. Hamid was a member of the radical Islamist group Jamaat al-Islamiyya, conspiring alongside Ayman Al-Zawaherri, the future leader of Al-Qaeda. He realized through this intense and life-changing and dramatic experience that the religion of Islam was in need of reform in order to be compatible with intellectual diversity and universal human rights. He has since worked as an expert on radical Islam for high-profile security groups like the Intelligence Fund and contributed to the growing movement of Islamic reform. Thank you to the Critical Thinking Unit, a joint partnership of Ideas Beyond Borders and the Ayaan Hirsi Ali Foundation, for supporting and facilitating Dr. Hamid's visit. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Hamid to the stage.
It's a pleasure and honor to be with you here in Dartmouth College. And the topic of today is not an easy one, but we'll try to make it clear for many, and we'll try to address some crucial issues related to it. The battle against radical Islam. This is how I see it. Is it only a battle by using troops, for example, and on ground, or is it a battle here in the brain and mind? I see the real battle is at the brain level, at the mind level, what I call fighting terrorism in Brainistan. Not just Afghanistan or Pakistan, but here in the brains and the mind. Because the moment you decide really to do a suicide bombing attack, for example, or to throw a bomb on innocent people, that's the moment when your brain orders your hands and muscles to move. This is the kinetic part in the last part. Let us address this part in the mind and the brain. And let me start with a simple introduction by stating that the Islamic culture, many people I realize in the West try to probably put all Muslims in one category. Some see them as all peaceful, some see them as all terrorists. That's wrong. Both approaches are wrong. The best way is to use a scientific methodology and try to analyze the culture. And I will show you how the Islamic culture can be really analyzed, as many cultures are. I see the Islamic culture as 5 circles. You know, the bullseye circles. The first one is what I call cultural Muslims, who are people like me and you, ordinary people who just celebrate naturally with every thing with other people from other religions, other beliefs, and they are not really radical in nature. They don't even go deep in the theology. They are not much religious. They celebrate maximally what is equivalent to the Christmas, like the feasts twice a year. This is what they know about Islam. Their name might be Muhammad or Fatima, but they may not belong at all to the radical area. You have another group that I call ritual Muslims, who are the people who just practice the 5 pillars, like do prayers, do charity, fasting in Ramadan, and these are limited to this stuff or these rituals without thinking in any radical or violent thing. There are many among them also like this. There are a third group that I can consider theological Muslims, who study Sharia, who wants to implement certain laws on the society, who wants to see the world through their glass as a Taliban or ISIS style of thing. They want to control things like Taliban. And this group, even though some of them may not use violence at all, but they are dangerous in certain way. Because if these are your beliefs and this is your belief system, the moment you exceed certain number in any society, then just by simple democracy and ballot, you can really control this society and bring some form of Sharia laws like what we see in Taliban, stoning of women, killing gays, etc. You can see all these terrible things happening in the name of Sharia laws. And so this group may not use violence, but they can go threat indirectly through our democratic process itself. The other group are the radical groups. They are the ones who are ready to use violence against their fellow human beings if they are different from them in views or opinions. They carry weapons, they can use violence, and there are the last group who are the terrorists who do suicide bombing. And I usually give an example to make it easy for everyone how to see it. Imagine if we have tonight a party and we invited someone called Muhammad or Fatima to this party, to that party. And Muhammad or Fatima just celebrated everything, danced, drank with us, everything went fine, and that's fine. They are likely kosher Muslims. But if Muhammad or Fatima said, excuse me for 5 minutes, we'll just go to pray and come back to celebrate with you everything, they are like ritual Muslims. They cared about the ritual. The first one didn't. If Muhammad said to you, how come you invite me to a party with alcohol and pork in it, I'm so offended, and he left with anger, then Muhammad is a theological Muslim. If Muhammad took the only bottle of wine that we had and he broke it in front of us, then Muhammad is the radical Muslim. He uses violence. If Muhammad exploded the whole area, then I don't need to tell you who was he, okay? It's clear. So let us now move to see the factors, or if you see the Islamic society, you will see some factors bringing the society toward the center, some factors can bring them to the periphery. Reformation, in my view, is bringing more people toward the periphery. Radicalization is bringing more people toward the center, as simple as that. If you asked me in person, what were the brainwashing tactics that they used with me when I was in the radical group, Jama'ah Islamiyah in Cairo, what was the process itself, how it happened? The first thing that happened to me, and this is written before even I knew about the critical thinking unit here, I wrote this in my book years ago, and I usually speak about it, which is suppression of my critical thinking. I will never forget the first day I went to pray with them in the Jama'ah Islamiyah mosque. And they are radical groups, they are the ones who created Al-Zawaherri and others. The guy who met with me, his name was Mukhtar. He escorted me from in front of the anatomy lecture room. He took me to the mosque to pray with them. And the first thing he said to me back then, I will never forget, he said to me, do you know what is the most important thing that you need to learn when you join us? I said to him, what? He said to me, al-fikru kufr. Fikr in Arabic, like F-K-R, means to think. Kufr, K-F-R, means to become an infidel. So the message was so simple. If you started to think, critical thinking, you will become an infidel. And he actually gave me a very interesting example. He said to me, he actually called me Tariq, because this is my real name. Tawfik is for security reasons I use. So he said to me, look Tariq, that your brain, is just like a donkey. You know, the donkey in America here represents maybe work, and if you work like a donkey. But in the Middle East, it represents stupidity. If you say to someone he's a donkey, this means he's extremely stupid. This is the symbol of stupidity. So he said to me, your brain, Tariq, is just like a donkey that can help you reach the palace of the king, Allah Almighty. Once you are there in the palace, Islam, inside Islam, do you take your donkey inside the palace or you leave it outside? I said to him, I leave it outside. Then it was welcome to start the process. So this was, in my view, the most fundamental step that happened to me is suppression of my critical thinking. The second was suppression of my human conscience. Naturally, your human conscience can tell you if something is good or bad. If you are asking the human being to tell, you told him go and kill that person there, his human conscience may tell him that's wrong. Why should I do that? So in order really to make you ready to accept violent things and the concept of violence, they suppressed our human conscience by simply, for example, focusing on if something is halal or permissible in religion, then it's okay for you. So accordingly, if in Sharia law, for example, stoning a woman to death for any relationship is halal or permissible, then I have to suppress my human conscience that tells me that this is something I can't accept. So just that the concept that if something is allowed by God or Allah, I can do it, even if it's against my human conscience because it is halal or permissible, then I can do terrible things in the name of religion because my human conscience is suppressed. The third mechanism was the use of severe punishment in hell. They use it very well. They tell you the torture techniques, what's going to happen to you, and in details if you do not follow their teaching. So this was the third tactic they used. The fourth tactic is what I call sex deprivation syndrome. And let me explain to you how it worked back then. And this is very true. And I will give you some evidence in the next page about this. It was so difficult during our time of young generations in the Middle East to marry or to have any extramarital relationship because it's strictly forbidden by culture and religion. And the more they become religion, the more any extramarital relationship becomes more complicated. So it goes like this. So they have some form of suppression here on this area, okay? On the other hand, they go read in the mainstream Islamic books and the explanations about the women waiting up there in paradise. Have you heard about the 72 virgins waiting in paradise for suicide bombers? Have you heard about this? Yeah, so as I always say, we have no reason to stay here and 72 reasons to go up there. This was how it was. So really that was very real, and you have all this suppression here on earth, and you have the fantasies waiting up there in paradise. And not only that, many, not all, but many of the Islamic scholars prohibited any physiological release of sexual desires. So you have extreme suppression, you are unable to marry, unable to have extramarital relationship. The possibility to get married needs maybe at least 20 years of education and getting money after that to be able to pay for the marriage. So it was so complicated. And that's why it's not surprising to see that this evidence, the majority, for example, of, the majority here, if you notice, yes, here, the majority of suicide bombers are males. If you notice this, it's not females. This can tell us that testosterone and hormonal factors can play a role in the process of suicide bombing itself. The second is, if you see this curve, this is a curve from an endocrinology book that shows how the level of testosterone here, the red line here, just for some reason it's not, the red line here is a peak of testosterone activity is around 18 years old, okay, 18 to 19. This is the peak age also of suicide bombing. It can't be just coincidence. The peak age is the same peak age of testosterone, so it has a relationship. The third is if you heard about the word Sunni and Shia, have you heard about this expression in Iraq and Iran? If you follow what's going on in Iraq, for example, are the majority of suicide bombers Sunni or Shia? Do you know any? Like the majority are typically Sunnis. One of the reasons, and not the only reason, it's one of the reasons, okay, is that possibly because the Shia theology allows in Iraq and Iran what's called the mut'a marriage, which is a temporary marriage for enjoyment that can last only 1 hour. I mean this literally. It's justified in their theology. So this can explain to us why probably young Shia are not inclined to do suicide bombing for sexual reasons. They may probably, to get these women in paradise. They can do still suicide bombing if their religious scholars told them to do so. That's another story. But not because of the sex deprivation syndrome. Now let me just touch on some strategic solutions for the problem, because every problem should have a solution. We can't just speak about problems forever. We have to reach a moment, what is the solution here? To make just long story short, I'll try to give the general structure of the solution. We have people here are pre-radicals here up there. And people then become radical, and then we have the terrorists. Each stage needs to be addressed separately. Because the last group, for example, the terrorists have weapons. They use weapons. So you need really to use some form of military force or weapons with them. But with the pre-radicals, you need theological reformation, radical thinking modification. I'll give examples here, and shaking the foundation strategies, and I'll give examples of each one now. So you need to work on the brain with new theology, new interpretations, changing the ways of thinking of people, and also when it comes to someone who is a radical already, who has become radicalized, trying to re-educate them can be complicated. It can take time, it may fail, but one of the most effective tactics that can work with them is using a negative deterrent that makes them unwilling to do the attacks. Because, for example, in World War II, what ended World War II was the leaders, like the Emperor of Japan, for example, or the leaders of the Nazi, wanted to live. So when they realized that they will die if they continue the war, they realized that we can't continue because we will die. So death was a negative deterrent for them. But for Islamic radicals, they want to die. So you are talking about a completely different story here. Someone who wants to die, the deterrent mechanism in their mind and the brain can be very different from the ordinary people. I will give you just a very fast comments on how theological reform can happen. I remember when I was young, there was a verse that I'm still there saying, kill the infidels wherever you find them, okay? So if I took this verse literally, as many of the radicals, I was thinking just going and killing every non-Muslim I see. And this was happening for some radicals who think in this literal understanding. But what happened later on, and it is in one of my books, is Modern Interpretation for the Quran. It's 650 pages in Arabic. I addressed this issue differently, and just briefly I tried to shed light on the use of the suffix al or the. Here the word kill the disbelievers. It's like if I said to you, I'm going to a White House tomorrow. It's different from telling you I'm going to the White House tomorrow. So the suffix there by itself can really completely change the meaning from a general meaning to very specific meaning that affects specific group at certain time in history. So this can just give you an example how the reinterpretation of text can happen just by shedding light on the suffix there. Can limit the meaning of many, if not most, verses to specific, the violent ones, I mean the ones used by the radicals to specific time in history. Also, this is an example of a program that I developed regarding the way to change the thinking traits that leads to radicalism. I mean here, for example, absolutism. When you think that your view about things is the only correct view and others has to be absolutely wrong. This absolutism. Also literalism and the judging people. There are certain thinking traits. Has nothing to do with religion here, but it's a process of thinking that can lead to, that's a very destructive way of thinking, but can end in radicalism. So I'll give you an example how this can be handled. For example, this image you can just show to people and tell them, what is this image? Yeah, this seems like Satan or devil. But imagine if someone on the other side is telling you, no, this is a beautiful angel, like a girl, like an angel. You say, oh, he's absolutely wrong. It is a devil, it's clear. But if you went to his position, you will see a completely different thing. It is the same photo from the other side. They just tell you absolutisms. When you think that your view is the only correct view, that is the beginning of a problem. Believe me, many radicals have been radicalized because they thought that I am the only correct thing and everyone else is absolutely wrong. The moment they start to put some form of relativism in their way of thinking, that is a beginning of critical thinking, a beginning of reform that can happen. Then shaking the foundation strategy is to make the radicals start to doubt the books they are using. Are they correct or not? Is the information that they are using correct or wrong? Create some form of doubt about the books and the references that they are using to promote the radical views and ideas. And also using negative reinforcement. I mentioned to you, they are not deterred by death, but there are ways to deter them. It's not impossible. There are ways to work on their mind and give them very strong negative deterrents to make them unwilling to do more attacks on us through specific psychological warfare operation program. Information warfare, using facts is an important thing in this issue. Like for example, in the Middle East, you can have many people, or the radical ones are promoting the views that the West is against the Muslim world and discriminating against Muslims. But you don't need to do anything but bring the fact. The fact is that in America and in the West in general, in Europe, there has been thousands of mosques and Islamic schools that were built in the last few decades. Compare this to the number of churches and synagogues that has been built in the Muslim countries. Then you will start to recognize who is really discriminating against the other. You don't need really to convince anyone, just put the fact in numbers, and the fact will speak volumes. Encouraging arts and music. If you notice, all radicals throughout the world, I'm talking about the Islamic radicals here, from Taliban to ISIS to Boko Haram to Sumerian radicals, the first thing they do is to suppress arts and the music. And this has something to do in the mind. Once you are deprived, and I did this experience myself, once you are deprived from arts and the music, then after some time you lose really the ability to distinguish between what is beautiful and what is ugly. And once your mind reaches that level, they can really put in your brain and mind anything that they want, and you will not be able to feel that's even ugly, because you are really deprived from the beauty, from arts, from music. So it is a tactic that has been used by radicals. So on the contrary, we can use actually arts and the music to make them to ordinary people, because my theory is that if you heard about poliomyelitis, you know poliomyelitis is polio, the disease. You probably don't hear about it because it's no longer exists. People just have vaccination to prevent it. We managed to defeat polio and to eradicate it, not by working on the sick ones, but actually our efforts were directed toward the normal people to vaccinate them to prevent the spread of poliomyelitis. This is how it worked. The same with radicalism and terrorism. The focus has to be bifocal. You have to focus on the militant groups, and at the same time you have to give attention to the normal people to vaccinate their brains and minds to make them unwilling to become radicals or resistant to the process of radicalization. So there are ways to work on their minds to just protect ordinary people, like what we did with polio. We're working on the normal people. That is what is missing actually in our approach in dealing with terrorism. Now, let me end here by giving you some critical thinking points. I just want you to think, believe me. I want everyone also watching us now to think about these points. The first one is simply many people, when I came to the United States 10 years ago, they believed that it's all the problem that we see in the Islamic world, from terrorism and radicalism, is all related to socio-economic and political circumstances there. And my question here is, if it is socio-economic and political circumstances, why it specifically affects specific group more than the others. Why socioeconomic and political circumstances, for example, didn't affect the Coptic community who live in Iraq and they didn't become suicide bombers. Why the Muslim community produces more suicide bombers than the Christian communities, for example, who live under the same socio-economic circumstances. In Europe, Buddhists, Hindus, Muslims, Christians live, immigrants I'm talking here from different countries, they live in the same socio-economic and political circumstances in general. Why specific group? If it was socio-economic and political circumstances that causes the problem, it shouldn't really make any difference. It should affect Muslims equally to Buddhists. So we should have heard in Europe, for example, many Buddhists doing suicide bombing, for example, and many Hindus and many Coptic Christians, many Jewish people. We don't hear this. Why specific group are affected more than the other? We have to think about the cause here. It would be an ideology that's causing the problem. The second question is, some people believe that it is the Arab-Israeli conflict that causes all the trouble. So once we solve the Arab-Israeli conflict, all the problems will be fixed. In the Middle East, all the radicalism, all terrorism, and it's all the fault of Israel and the issue of the Arab-Israeli conflict. And my point to them is that, is the Arab-Israeli conflict the cause of terrorism in Algeria and Iraq and Pakistan? For example, we have more than 150,000 innocent Algerian Muslims were killed by the hands of the Salafi radical groups in Algeria in the 90s. Some of the infants were beheaded in front of their fathers and mothers. Are you telling me that this is because of the Arab-Israeli conflict? Muslims killing one another in such a brutal way. The same in Iraq, Sunni and Shia killing one another. In Pakistan, this mosque, for example, is a Sufi mosque in Pakistan that was exploded with hundreds of people were killed by the Salafi Islamic radicals. So are they also killing their fellow Muslims? And you know, but statistically, majority of victims of terrorism now are Muslims. So are Muslims killing one another because of the Arab-Israeli conflict? It's another question for everyone to think. Then which causes the other? I heard from many people in the news and here and there that terrorism is the outcome of poverty. You solve unemployment, you solve poverty, you solve the problem. But let me raise a question here. Which causes the other? Is it terrorism or poverty? If you know about something called Al-Aqsa massacre, this is a massacre that happened to many tourists in Egypt years ago, in the 90s. And the attack was on Japanese tourists and many other Western tourists as well were killed in the process. They mutilated their bodies. It was really terrible. After the attack, tourism industry, what do you expect for tourism industry? What do you think would happen to it? Going up or down? Collapse. It collapsed. When it collapsed, what happened to poverty levels? It started to increase. When poverty increases, it becomes easier for the radicals to recruit more people and more. So here, this is a model how terrorism and the ideology of violence was the cause of poverty, not the other way around. And just imagine if Iraq and Afghanistan didn't have this ideology and they don't have terrorism, how these countries would have flourished today in democracy, for example, when they were given the chance for democracy. What is damaging their economy is the ideology that's causing terrorism that's at the end making many foreign investors unwilling to invest in these countries and killing tourism industry. So you can tell many things here that can happen as an outcome of terrorism. So when people think it is poverty that causes terrorism, why poor people in other nations do not use suicide bombing? For example, in Latin America or India, if they are Hindus, for example, or poor Christians, why they don't do suicide bombing? So when we think here, which causes the other, it's important. Because if terrorism is the main or the primary factor of the problem, then your focus has to be here. Trying to solve poverty without fixing the terrorism itself and the ideology of terrorism can be just hopeless. And it's like really giving effort in something that's not going to give an effect, because the primary factor is here, still there, the ideology of terrorism. Then let us, just the last few slides, one is about tolerance. And here I will quote my wife. She's a pediatrician. And she, one day, I remember President Obama was speaking on the news and on TV, and he said in the meaning of that, we became, here in America, beacon for liberty and modernity and democracy because we were tolerant. And she said to me, that's absolutely wrong. I said to her, how? She said to me, we became beacon for liberty and democracy because we were intolerant. I said to her, how this can happen? She said to me, had we been tolerant of slavery, slavery would have existed or would exist today. So the reason we are enjoying now free America that prevented and abolished the slavery, it's because, not because we were tolerant of slavery, but because we were intolerant of it. And we showed it zero tolerance. So the question comes, have we ended slavery because we were tolerant to it, or showed it zero tolerance and we were intolerant to it? This just tells us that some words we use, but we have to think deeply. We did not end the slavery and discrimination and many of this stuff because we were tolerant to these values. On the contrary, it was because we showed these values a very high level of intolerance or zero tolerance, in other words. See, another question here. The limits of religious freedom. Many uses the concept of religious freedom. Once they hear the word, their mind is paralyzed. Everything is allowed as long as it's part of someone's religion. Okay? Here's an example. You see this guy and these people from ISIS, Daesh, the radical group in Iraq. This is a gay. And the punishment according to Sharia laws is unanimous agreement to kill gays. They differ. Some say by burning, some by pushing them from the top of a mountain or very high location like this. So this is a real image, this is a photo. So this guy is now going to be killed in messages in the next few seconds. Imagine it, just because he is different from the others, or in their view, and the ISIS people are practicing this because their religion, as they see it, ordered them to kill gays. Now you have to choose. Will you stop their freedom of religion and intervene to save the life of this guy? Or will you allow them to practice their religious freedom and allow the guy to be killed? And you choose. Will you just interfere with their freedom of religion and save the life of the man? Or allow their freedom of religion and let the man be killed? So the life of human beings, I believe, is very important. I believe so. But this is a question for you to think. The last question is, are you with or against Sharia law? Sharia law has some issues like eating certain things and not eating certain things. I have no problem with this part, for example. You eat whatever you like. But I'm sorry, I have some problem with certain values in Sharia law and principles that with unanimous agreement among the scholars, as I mentioned to you, about these ABCs, that I put them as ABCs test for radical Islam, which is killing apostates, beating women, and calling Jews pigs and monkeys, declaring wars on non-Muslims, fighting and killing Jews before end days, and gay killing. These are fundamentals, and when some people say, oh, the scholars have some different views, yes, they have, but the difference is not in the principle itself. All of them agreed on stoning of women to death. That's why you don't hear very loud voices in the Muslim world complaining against ISIS because they stone women to death. They don't do this because this is part of the unanimous agreement. They differ in what? You know in what? The type of the stones, for example. Should we use big stones or small stones? That's a kind of difference that when people say, oh, they have different views, yes, that's fine. But as long as the people who are high in the theology of Islam did not produce an Islamic books and they start teaching this in their institutions that clearly stand against these values, then I think many of the same human beings will clearly say we are against this. And this is here a simple test for many, that are you with or against Sharia law? I'm not talking here about how to walk and how to eat. I'm talking about these principles, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I will never forget one day I was speaking in Dearborn, Michigan, in front of a huge crowd. And when it came to the number 3 here, calling Jews pigs and monkeys, some imam from Senegal interrupted my speech. And he said to me, Dr. Hameed, why you mention these issues? I'm a moderate imam, and I participate in interfaith dialogue. I have many Jewish friends here in the community. I said, great, great, imam. But would you mind, imam, instead of telling us how moderate you are, just to prove this to us right now? Everyone was silent. And I said, would you mind, imam, to invite me and some of our Jewish friends and the brothers and sisters who are sitting with us tonight to your mosque next Friday prayer? And instead of telling us how moderate you are, just stand up in front of your congregation and say it clearly, loudly, and unambiguously that Jews are not pigs and monkeys. Would you do this, imam? He refused. Just imagine. So the issue here is we have to set parameters for the word radicalism. The final thing I would like to share with you is not related to critical thinking, but is related to some event that happened recently in last week or a couple of weeks. The killing of Pittsburgh, the Jewish people who were killed just because they were Jewish. And this, what happened to them, actually reminded me with a real story about a man called Daniel Pearl. I don't know if you heard about this name or not. He was a journalist in the Wall Street Journal. He was the first person to be beheaded by the Islamic radicals in Pakistan. The first person. He was a wonderful human being. And I had sort of an oath to myself that wherever I will be able to remind the world with his name, I will. Because he was killed also like these people in Pittsburgh just because he was a Jew. And the last word he said to the Islamic radicals who killed him, yes, I am a Jew. His wife was pregnant. The baby couldn't see her father because he was beheaded. And I will share with you in less than 1 minute just part of a poem that I wrote for him. And I feel now after the event of Pittsburgh, it's fair to probably remind people of it again. I said to the soul of Daniel Pearl the following. أقسم أني, and I will say it in Arabic first and translate. أقسم أني لن أترك اسمك يمحى من ذاكرة التاريخ. I swear that I will never ever let your name be erased from the memory of history. وسأكتب اسمك بالدمع, and I will write your name with my tears. وسأحفر اسمك في الصخر, and I will carve it at the top of the mountains so that everybody will know it. فما قتلوك وحدك يا دانيال. They haven't only killed you, O Daniel, بل قتلوا الحق وقتلوا الحب وقتلوا أحلام الأجيال. But they killed the meaning of love, the meaning of the truth, and the dreams of the coming generations. قسما بأنينك وقت الذبح. I swear with your groaning pain when they beheaded you. وبدمع طفلك في الرحم. And I swear with the tears of your child when it was still in the womb. أني لن أنساك يا دانيال, that I will never ever forget you, O Daniel. إن قتلوك لأنك يهودي, if they have killed you because you are a Jew, فأنا يهودي منذ الآن, then I am a Jew from now on. God bless you all and thank you so much.